And we are live on Thought to Action, presented by Project Sentinel and the London Center for Policy Research. I'm Chris Cordani. We have a lot to talk about post midterms and what we're going to be doing moving forward. And yes, something happened yesterday, which is going to be the cause of some controversy, I guess, on some ends and some celebration on some others. But who wants to hear from me? I'm Chris Cordani. I am dealing the questions and hosting this program, but we do have our experts here from Project Sentinel, and we're going to be talking with them. First off, our president, Tony Schaefer, Lieutenant Colonel retired, and Senior Fellow Jay Homnick. Gentlemen, I wanted to get into the new leadership, the gun issue in New York, all these things that are happening, but Donald Trump last night made his announcement that he's going to run for president in 2024. Well, not totally unexpected. It's something that has been floated around amongst not only our circles, the rank and file electorate, and of course people within the Republican Party. Should Trump run? Should Trump not run? But the fact is, he's doing so. What do you think?
So I was on BBC4 this morning, early our time, early their time, talking about this. And as I said to the British, the Commonwealth audience, I'll say it again here, there are several issues that President Trump has to fix to be successful. First, he's got to do a better job of selecting people around him to facilitate his policies. There were a number of failures during the time he was president that related to bad personnel choices. And I think I'd like to believe he's learned from that. Secondly, some of the great policies he created, like the Abraham Accords, and I think a no new war policy relating to national security were great. But again, he did not have the bureaucratic depth. That is to say, he did not have the control of the bureaucracies within the government to facilitate those things becoming real and sustained. Next time, if there is a next time, he's got to go 3 levels down to select leaders who are willing to support his policies. I believe his policies were correct, by the way. So I did say that. And third, he's got to really account for some of the issues relating to COVID. He's got to move forward with really demanding China be held accountable for releasing the virus. And more importantly, the issue of Fauci. For better or for worse, he embraced and allowed Fauci to do what he did. He allowed Operation Warp Speed to go forward, and there's been really no accounting for what we've now come to find, some real issues of health, myocarditis and other adverse effects from the vaccines to a number of groups. So those things I think need to be examined in detail before he can successfully run for president. Otherwise, those are things that become additional baggage to the fact that a certain percentage of the population hate him and will do everything they can to oppose his running for office. So those are my initial views from his declaring for president.
Well, Jay, what are your thoughts?
Just to respond to that, before exploring other angles, but the fact is that Trump went into the presidency without having a team, that he hadn't really thought into who he's going to use for the different things. And he kind of was winging it and not really expecting to win. And so when he won, he was already in a deep hole because you got to have plays. You got to have people lined up. So the good news that I have to report here is that he's not going to make that full mistake again. There is not necessarily stage managed by him, but at least on the Republican side of things, there are a certain amount of recruiting efforts that are already in place. I can't give out a lot of information, obviously. I just want to reassure people that there are recruiting efforts in place now where they are looking at and trying to get solid people ready so that Trump or DeSantis, if the right people win, they will have people to turn to for implementation and not have to start from scratch. When in 2016 when he won, I personally approached people and said, "How do I apply for a job in the administration?" And they said, "Oh, there's a website." Okay, and I figured, what am I going to throw my name into a million names on a website? I didn't even do it. So, that's personal experience. And by the way, another interesting thing that's important to mention, it's a little bit of a tangent, but almost never do these candidates look at the good policy analysts as a place to take people from. So you can have guys been writing fantastic policy in the Republican, leaning magazines for 30 years, and gets it all right, and it doesn't help him one bit. There was a guy named David Hogberg. I haven't seen him in some years. Who he wrote to the American Spectator, and in one Senate contest in a midterm, he predicted every single race correctly. Now, it blew my mind. It's almost impossible because some of these races are settled by a few thousand votes. He predicted every single race correctly. Now, if you were in any other business in the world, if a guy could do that, he'd immediately be hired on by some major business to be, somewhere near the top as an analyst. But it doesn't help. The guy, Tony can go on TV 100 times and analyze the thing exactly, and that doesn't help. Now Tony he gets, they know him anyway. But I'm just saying, it's not just being on TV and getting it right, not going to get you anywhere. And so the result is that a lot of the smart guys end up not getting hired, and that's a big problem. Now, but let's just go back to Trump and sort of kind of bottom line it. The bottom line is Trump has to figure out a way how to get past the negatives that he's been building up, a lot of unforced errors as well. He has to figure out a way to get by the negatives. His positives are that he first of all, he did it once and pretty well before COVID came, and second of all, that he has a successful career in not only in construction, but just in general, and seeing where the world is going and picking projects that succeed in all kinds of fields, including television. So he somehow has to figure out a way how to sell himself better, but things are not looking up for that. Put it that way. I'm not optimistic, because when he already went after DeSantis in a foolish way, right at the moment that DeSantis won a big victory, terrible mistake. Clearly not. No one was advising him. Stop gunning for DeSantis now. No one smart was advising.
Yeah, I think people were advising him. He just doesn't always take the advice, and that's my experience based on having advised him in his campaign. So I think at times he's a bit mercurial for the wrong reasons. And I think, to your point, trying to pick a fight with DeSantis at the time, DeSantis has done very well for the state of Florida. Trump even admits he votes for him. I don't know what this is about Trump if he's trashing the guy he just voted for. Just saying, the optic is not good. So.
It's going to be theatrical. It's going to be fun to watch. But the fact is Donald Trump able to win another election? And I'm not saying because he doesn't have a following. I'm saying because there were laws put in place to fortify the election, as was bragged about in Time magazine after 2020. We're going to talk about that. There are election integrity issues, but these are designed to keep they're thought to design to keep Republicans from winning in certain states. But the fact is, combine that with the media attention and the scrutiny he's going to get. Example number one, that as soon as Trump made the announcement, CNN puts out a fact check on him. But I never ever see a fact check on Joe Biden when he pulls his speech out. That Dwight Schrute speech he put up a little before the election. There were no fact checks there, but I do remember, and I want to take you back to the George Bush administration, the George W. Bush administration. Towards the end of that, near the election, there was a lot of news media fact checking on his speeches, even as the guy was talking. That never happened with Obama, and it didn't happen with Joe Biden. There's a perception that the media has created that Donald Trump is a big fat liar and a loudmouth. Okay, well, he did the loudmouth thing on his own. But the fact is, That's in people's heads. It doesn't help when Trump pulls his theatrics, and that could render him unable to win. So the question is, will there be support? And again, I'm not asking who you, me, or anybody else here watching is supporting, but I'm saying, will there be a waning of support for Donald Trump in favor of somebody with um, maybe more favorable populist policies, but maybe a little bit less on the theatrics and the over scrutinized approach towards him by the media? That's a lot of words, but that's the question. Tony?
Well, I guess I'll address it first. Trump has created conditions for those to hate him, no doubt. And I think it takes some work to get past that. I speak to people all the time based on being a former advisor to the Trump 2020 campaign. You know, how do I view his mean streak? I view it like, so what? He is who he is, but he's got good policies. So I always refer back to the policies which were successful and actually contributed to benefiting the American people during his time. I think on the direction of things relating to people, how they interpret him, I don't know how anybody will rationally vote for a Democrat at this point. I don't understand how people can vote against their own self-interest, but they do constantly. So I think there needs to be a bridge made between what benefits Trump brought to every American, and try to remind people, you know, he's not a perfect guy. And the media did go about this vilification of him purposely. That was done with a great deal of vigor and enthusiasm by the media. But there has to be essentially a battle over the next 2 years. Remember, we've got 2 years to go. I mean, we're 2 years out. Although it seems like, you know, these last 2 years went pretty fast. I would argue they didn't. They kind of drug along. We've got 2 more years. So this next year has to be something where the deal that Trump is offering has to be sold. He's got to sell it. I don't think there's anybody else out there who can stand up to him regarding fundraising, regarding reach. And I like DeSantis. I know Governor DeSantis. I've met him. I worked to advise he and his caucus when he was a member of Congress. And as much as I think he's an amazing administrator, an amazing leader, I just don't know if he has even the interest of running against Trump at this point. He's relatively young. I mean, he's literally half of Donald Trump's age. So he's got a lot of time left that he can do good things. So I almost think it's in his interest to focus on Florida and not worry about the other stuff right now. The other people in the field, Pence, big time eye rolls like, yeah, I just don't see Pence doing anything. And my friend Mike Pompeo, I like Mike a lot. But again, I don't think Mike would have the fundraising or name recognition necessary to take on a Trump in a series of primaries, which would be, I think, largely dominated by people who love President Trump. So I think the path forward, my advice is to Trump, moderate your mean streak if I'm asked, because I was asked last night what I advised their campaign against. Like, yeah, my as I've told a number of folks, Tony Zinni, General Tony Zinni, once instructed me, because I asked him for the guidance. I said, what do I do with someone in a position to advise regarding policy? And he said, you advise anybody who asks for it, no matter what the political party is. So, and I've said this before, I'd advise Democrats if they ask for the advice. I have advised Democrats, but they generally don't want my advice because they're not interested in effective foreign policy. They're interested in those who will say what they want to hear. And I will not do that, even for the Trump administration. And I've said before here on this venue and others, while I was advising their campaign, they didn't take my advice to the level I think that would have helped them. Just saying. So I think that's one of the stipulations I would actually ask for, is like, if you ask me to advise, next time listen to my advice, because I think some mistakes were made by not listening to it.
By the way, that's a great piece of advice from General Zinni, where, you know, you should always be prepared, regardless of party, to advise anyone who's interested.
That's right.
It's up to them if they want to buy in. No question about that. But here's what I want to say about DeSantis. He's a great guy, and he has a track record of not trying to go up against people who are a step ahead in the party. So, like when the first time I met DeSantis, I was sitting next to him at a dinner, and he was officially a candidate for Senate at that point because Rubio was running in the primary for president. But the minute that Rubio realized he's not going to win, and he shut down his campaign and said he's going to run for re-election, DeSantis immediately shut down his campaign and went back to run for Congress. So, in that respect, he has a track record as a gentleman of, I'm willing to wait my turn. And so that portends him, not really standing up against Trump. Sure, put it this way. If he does go up against Trump, he's certainly not going to do it now. He's not going to do it 2 years out. Because he'll put his head down, work hard as governor, try to do good stuff. And then I'll watch and see if Trump is coasting, hey, then he probably will hang back. If Trump is bouncing along and not getting as far as he might have anticipated, he might, jump in. Don't forget Ronald Reagan did jump in against Gerald Ford and almost beat him in that primary.
That's true.
So, I think he's a smart strategist. He's a Marine, a Navy guy, and he'll have a good instinct of whether he should make a move this time or not. The other thing I want to say about Trump is that, one of the there's a famous line from the military that the generals are always fighting the last war because, what worked last time, you do it again. And the truth is that to be a nimble businessman or a nimble politician, you have to be recognized when that old technique doesn't apply anymore. So when he ran the first time in a field of 17 guys who were all political professionals, and he started cutting them all down with the cute little, not cute to the guys, they all hated him for it, but all the little insults, nicknames that were not complimentary.
I think they're cute. I don't mind those, but I mean,
right, but I'm saying
we're us. We're us.
I'm saying when he did it as the outsider the first time, you could do it. But I think when he's starting already making, names for DeSantis, big mistake. Put that name game aside. It worked as the outsider. Now you're already a guy who was president, and it's just not. Now, don't remember, what's the chance to listen to me? Very little. People told him from day one, don't be unpresidential. But there is the fact that he's willing to be unpresidential in certain key spots is useful, but you have to really pick your spots for it. You can't just walk around and be a goon. And especially here, he's got to be the classy guy. He's one in the past, and he shouldn't be. When you're insulting the people below you, it looks bad. When you're insulting your equals, it's more of a arm wrestling.
Fair enough. But that leads us to the next question. If you look ahead to 2024 and look back at the midterm election of this year, the big question is, well, at least from a lot of people and people within the media, people within political circles, why wasn't there the red wave that was maybe expected? And this isn't just a media concoction. This is history. And you can look at the last, you can look at 1994 and 2010 as prime examples. The fact is we didn't have one. I believe, and this is something I want to float to both of you, I believe that has to do with messaging. When the Republicans were talking about inflation and why it's important to handle the economy a lot better and go back to being energy independent for a lot of reasons, this was like Richie Cunningham running for school president. Or no, was it school? I remember he was running for school president or running to talk about Adlai Stevenson. I forgot which episode that was, but he's pointing out reasons and all this stuff. This whole bunch of I would say, just a long-winded approach. Kind of like my question here to you guys, a little bit long-winded. The fact is, it was kind of, it may have resonated with a lot of people, but the Democrats' quick message, the simple terms, they're going to take away your rights. We want to take guns off the streets with gun control. And what was the other one? Oh yeah, the threat to democracy. Those are the big ones that struck fear into people. Their messaging was simple, clear, and well, should I say simple and not clear? And yes, we can say the bribery of the $10,000 student loan forgiveness may have brought some young people out, but the fact is, the Republicans need a better messaging strategy. And when I say that, I would like to see them break it down easily or more easily for the people who, and I don't want to say low information voter like Ms. Clinton had said in the past, but the people who don't pay attention to politics enough, that don't really know the issues, who are hard workers, who are trying to put food on the table, or even the surgeon who was too busy with his head in with his head in his schedule and trying to repair people. They don't have time to delve into the issues and listen to us explain everything. The fact is, we need to, or I would say not just we, but the people with the more populist voice, the people on the right side, need a better way to send their message to the people. How do you think we can approach that, gentlemen?
Well, I talked to one of our neighbors who was from California, just saying, I won't mention any names, and they fell for the propaganda. They felt that, ooh, abortion, they're coming for that right. It's not a right. Never was, but the left convinced of that. One of the things I'm fed up with is this whole, every time they say this, like, it just shows their ignorance. We're protecting democracy. We don't have a democracy. We have a republic, a representative republic, a constitutional republic. We do not have a democracy. And so every time they talk about that, protecting it means absolutely nothing. It's an affectation that is artificial and construct and means nothing. And so every time they say that, it's meant to scare people, and it worked. And so part of this has to be an education of the fact that what they say means nothing. The abortion issue, while it's something I'm sure people will want to debate, it's, each state has to resolve that for itself. There was never any constitutional right of abortion. Never existed. So part of this has to essentially you have to dismantle their narrative and their lies. And Biden lies constantly. One of the other big things is climate change. Let's just talk about that for a second. The Earth will not fundamentally change in any way regarding human existence on the planet, regarding whether for the next probably 1,000 years. And the net direction of climate is that we're going into a cooling period. All indications are by geologic time, no matter what man does, he will not be able to prevent the next chilling of the planet. These things happen irregardless of us. The biggest determinant factor is the sun. And last time I checked, there's no technology that will either be able to turn up or turn down the amount of light coming from the sun. So the whole left construct of climate change control is beyond insane. So every time I hear that, it just drives me nuts as someone who has a degree in this. It's all the absorbing of scientific process and politicizing it for benefit of a certain narrative, the narrative which is fundamentally false. So these things to me drive, as someone who is fact-based, drives me nuts. So it tells me, Chris, that we've got to figure out a way to break through and use emotion to point these things out. That, no, I'm sorry, you're not going to die in 10 years from climate. Yes, right. Indeed. The open border and fentanyl is a weapon of mass destruction, and you will sooner suffer the ill effects of fentanyl than you will from any effects of climate change. Just saying. Nobody's died from climate change. Thousands have died from fentanyl, and we've got to change that messaging. And that's something that I think some of the best minds in the business need to think about. But it's very clear that narrative was effective. It worked on low information voters. And the way to counter that is to go back and go and address this at the level of understanding of most voters, which means you have to essentially reduce the details of the message, but make sure they understand that there are things wrong, and you will suffer from those things unless you can understand you need to vote a different way than you have in the past.
It's important to appeal to the voters' emotions in a lot of ways, because they will stay home if they don't feel like getting up and voting either.
Exactly.
And this is another issue. When when I was watching I'm in New York, so I was watching the Governor Hochul, the Governor Hochul commercials where she was saying, Zeldin is going to take away your abortion rights. You're not going to be
Exactly.
able to have an abortion. It's going to be horrible. When everybody really should know that in New York, that's never going to change anyway. But that was one of her big points.
That's right.
And the fact is, taking away your rights, and and the other term was election denier. That's another one. Election
Yeah.
denier.
That worked very well.
Well, what it worked because it triggered the phrase Holocaust denier. And
Right.
I hate to put it that way, but that's exactly what the message is all about, to tie people who question the integrity of the new rules that were made in 2020 to, and it was said, fortify the elections, to take those people who questioned that or wanted to maybe clean that up for the next election. You tie them in with people who are running around with skinheads, screaming around and vandalizing synagogues because they're deniers of the Holocaust. That's horrible, but that's the message that seemed to work for them. I'm not,
Yep.
I am a proponent of playing fight fire with fire, but I also like to at least keep some semblance of a high road on that same vein while they go very, very low. Jay, what are your thoughts on that?
The Democrats will always go low. So you have to come into it knowing that. By the way, going back to the first point, the Republicans keep reminding everyone that it's a republic because it's the name of their party. The Democrats keep calling it a democracy because it's the name of their party. It's simple branding, and so they're always pushing the democracy piece of it. And the truth is that the man in the street thinks of it as a democracy in the sense that you get to vote. To them, that's all that word means. So, as far as that goes. Now, on abortion, abortion at the end of the day is not going to be a big issue going forward. Even if they won some of these referendums, but abortion is a momentary issue because the Supreme Court just decided it. Going forward, longer term, the Democrats are not going to keep bringing up abortion every 2-4 years. It's not in their interest anymore. And so right now there was an emotional moment that they could jump on that. But basically, abortion is still legal in a lot of places. At the same time, I don't mean to diminish what the Supreme Court accomplished. I just attended a meeting this morning of Republican strategists, and where they showed that there's now 5,000 kids a year more being born in Texas every year since the time they stopped the abortion. So it definitely has an impact. If you make it less convenient, there's going to be less abortions. So, but let's get back to the climate issue and finish with that. The climate issue is really the classic. We have to really study that, how they took a thing this phony and made it into a reality that the whole world just moves forward year after year. The United Nations, they all figured out that it's in their interest somehow, governments, to with this phony climate crisis, because that always is a blank check for them to back up any program they want to do and say there's something to do with the climate. When I wrote a series of articles about climate in the late 90s, when it was a big issue, not long after Al Gore's book came out. And a lot of the old climate websites have my articles from there. And I basically try to boil it down to a very simple point, which I said that they're telling us, A, that the world is in danger from climate, and B, that it can be fixed. Those two things cannot both be true, because
Right.
by the time there would already be indications that somehow through driving cars or flying planes, whatever it is, we overturned the climate to the extent that you can identify already statistically. By that point, you're not going to be able to reverse it. So, but of course, the whole premise is ridiculous. We had ice ages, we had stone ages, this world has gone through everything. It has in it built-in abilities, whether you believe in God or you don't, however you want to define it to yourself. It has a built-in ability to respond to situations all kinds of fail safes, and it keeps itself going. And it's not going to, go down because you're driving cars or flying planes. Just nonsense. So if you can't get your head out of that, crazy space, there's very little hope that we're going to win you over with logic about anything in life.
Well, I think I'd like to believe, Jay, it's self-apparent that the world hasn't ended or will not end in the time frame that AOC said it would. It's not going to. And the fact is that the left is very good about using propaganda, and they take a little bit of something and they run with it. I mean, the language they use about the world ending, about how you, to your point, you give the governments money and they'll fix it. No, they won't. No, there's absolutely no way. Even if if you go with what they're saying is true, if you accept what they're saying about the climate and CO2 is true, which is not. CO2 is a gas, it's not a pollutant. If you accept their premise, not a thing they're proposing would actually stop what they're saying would happen from the CO2. It's completely disconnected, but no one is willing to call them out. So that's the other thing we should do, is start calling them out. And this is what I'd like to do publicly. I'd love to be in a debate on CNN, just saying,
That would
where
work.
someone says this and I say, that's nonsense. This is why it's nonsense. And the other thing too, Jay, you've heard me say this before. I don't know how they get away with using a Nazi term for their gun control. Assault weapon came from Sturmgewehr, which was a term that Hitler himself pinned. So it's kind of like, how is it you all are constantly using a term that Adolf Hitler personally used to describe a weapon he thought would win them World War II? How do they get away with that?
Well,
Because
that's
no
also
one calls them on it.
that has to do with media acceptance of these things too. When the left wants the media to refer to the other side a certain way, like a far right candidate, then that label is going to be attached in even news stories. Remember the big
Right.
lie? The big lie really happened in 2016 with Russian collusion. But George Stephanopoulos, yeah, that's right, some a Clinton mouthpiece who somehow is the head of the news. The news chief for ABC radio network. See, I'm in New York, so I'm a little New York biased, WABC, but he gets to use the big lie like it's a journalistic term. The fact is that's opinion. When I was learning journalism back in college, it used to be, don't insert your opinion into these stories. You have to write it as if you're an observer, not a participant, and not somebody who's trying to overly influence. Having said that, that's part of the messaging. We see far right candidates, and on the other side, it's progressive candidates, implying that there's progress if you vote for them. They're not far left. No way. Here's another thing, and this is another thing, something that bothers me about messaging. Some of the most trusted people on the left, okay, some of the most well-known people on the left, and so I think I put the wrong screen up. This is what happens when you do something live.
I don't trust that person either, just saying. So.
That's right. Well, I put the wrong screen up, but I put kind of the headline there. Sonia Sotomayor.
Don't put up the anime screen. We don't want to see anime. So
Well, I think you want to see this one. This is why it's important.
yeah, no anime though.
Okay. Well, here, this will satisfy you a little bit more because it's something she said very, very recently. I'm getting to that right now. If you look at this, Sotomayor warns reversals may undermine faith in the legal system. Yes, I get that's what she said. Here's the issue I have here. The quote goes like this. Justices have to proceed with a great deal of caution because people rely on the stability of the law in believing and having faith in the judicial system and not prone to politics. She's implying that Supreme Court decisions are in fact the law, where Roe versus Wade is obviously what she was targeting. That was never the law. The law says, and I'm talking about the Constitution, the law says states have the rights to determine what the federal government does not.
Right.
And that's a simple way of putting it. Fact is, the messaging to people from the Democrats, from the left side is, this is the law. And that's what people register and think. We're somehow going against the law. That's another issue with messaging. How do we bring the real truth to people without confusing them?
You just say she's lying. I mean, that she is. The Supreme Court is not a body that creates laws. That is not in their charter. It is very clear, Chris, what's in the Constitution. They are supposed to rule on laws which are created by Congress and either implemented correctly or incorrectly by the executive branch. That's it. They cannot legislate, period. And the moment someone like her says that, as a matter of fact, we should be in a position, the Sentinel, to go get a Supreme Court justice or a judge or a former attorney general, which I know who I go to, and get him to go on the record saying that's a lie. That's simply not true. The judiciary is designed to be the ultimate road guard, referee, determiner of fact, not someone who can actually legislate or determine what law is. That's why we have the problem we have right now regarding lack of confidence in the system, because of people like her and comments like that.
Exactly. And by the way, when they pull the Constitution and make it mean something that it doesn't say,
exactly,
that's not only one decision. That affects the whole system, because now we don't have a document that really binds us.
So so Chris, she's created a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yes, there's undermining of the confidence in the judiciary because she's created it, and the political fabric of her side wants this, because that chaos provides them the cover for all sorts of things they want to do, where they want to legislate from the bench. It's illegal, improper, and should never be permitted, called out anytime it's exposed. So
Exactly. But the message they're trying to put out is this: they almost call it an abortion law, if anything, but it's not. It was a decision based on, well, I'll say it was based on emotion and public relations back then, but the fact is it was not necessarily based constitutionally. The overturning, however, was. And people aren't always going to like what the proper decision is going to be. They aren't going to like what the law is going to be. The fact is, that's where you elect officials to handle that. You don't sit there and pretend that a judicial decision, if it's wrong, is going to stay there, because the Constitution has to and always will be the law of the land. I'm not one of these guys.
Well, Chris, to that point,
or anything like that. Right.
When they overturned it, they could have literally gone the other way. It's like, no, we misinterpreted it. We meant that everybody should not be permitted to have abortions, because the way it was interpreted, they could have done 180. They could have just said, no, this was wrong. We need to stop all. They could have done that. They didn't. They just said, basically, this was wrongly decided. Put it back to the 10th Amendment to the states. And to this day, I still believe, that's part of why Sentinel exists, we need to examine what the federal government can absorb and take it upon itself to do, and what it can't, because, again, I don't see anywhere there is in the Constitution anything about abortion. Not a thing. Yet the federal government for years has been performing the function, promoting it, without any legal foundation to do it. I don't know how they're getting away with it, but that's something that needs to be looked at.
And let me add something to that. And I had a situation where I was advising a certain business, and somebody moved in right next door to him to compete. And then a couple months later, that guy, the new guy who moved in, approached the old guy and said to him, listen, this competition is not so great for us. How about if we work out a system where I'll be open different hours than you? And so the first guy was the guy I advised. And he came back to me and said, Jamie, should I take his offer? I said, on what basis? Because he says it's not good to have this squabble going on. I said, he created the squabble. You were sitting there. He shows up, starts the squabble, and then he comes to you and says, it's a squabbling is not nice.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that's what they do. They come and make some crazy decision that's against the Constitution. And then if you want to knock their decision off, they say, you're undermining the status quo. Right. No, you undermine the status quo. We're trying to correct it.
That's right. The status quo isn't always right. We have a basis for the law. If you want to change it, there are options for that as well. Yes, you're going to have to jump through some hoops, but that's the reason for that. We're not a country that is designed to succumb to I'll call it a mobocracy, or the tyranny of the slight majority, if you will. But a mobocracy is.
I don't think they're a majority. Just
the point I'm trying to make, though, is there's a numerical majority in votes sometimes. Sometimes there isn't. The fact is, you can't, if there's a 50.1 to 49.9% decision, you can't, we're a nation that's designed where the 50.1% cannot shove anything down the throat of the 49.9%.
That's true.
That's where I'm going here. And that's why the nation was set up. And that's why we have a constitution.
That's
and
true.
That is why we need to protect it. Having said that, and I want to get to this because Tony is doing a plethora of media appearances today. So enjoy that. We're going to check it out on our social media, Project Sentinel on, of course, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Getter, Truth Social. Tony and I are both on there. So follow us. You'll find out where Tony is. Fact is, in New York, Governor Hochul scored I'm going to call it a temporary victory. But the fact is, New York's her mega gun ownership law was repealed, sort of, or at least turned over by a judge a little while back. The government fought it, and another judge turns over parts of the turnover. Whereas there are still no gun zones, at least temporarily, according to what's happening, because this law is absolutely unconstitutional. But the fact is, one thing that really bothers me about this more than anything else is that if you apply for a license under that law to own a gun, you have to turn over, or one has to turn over one's social media information to the government, which is subject to a load of abuse. You could just be denied firearms ownership to defend yourself simply because you practice wrongthink, according to who's sitting in Albany. And that is going to be a huge problem. And that, again, is another arm of a communist China-style social credit system.
Right.
Gentlemen, I want to throw this at you.
So I'll be very brief on this. It's illegal. You cannot do that. You cannot take anything I say or do that's not illegal. If I have strong opinions, that's not illegal. That right is defended by the First Amendment. So you cannot take something I used in the First Amendment and say, oh, that proves you're not worthy of your Second Amendment. Again, there's no legal authority for anything like that anywhere within any jurisprudence or system of governance, period. So to me, it will be overturned eventually. I just feel sorry for the people of New York having to go through it right now. So,
and paradoxically, if you have strong views, you're a guy who needs self-defense more than the average, because someone else with strong views may come after you.
Exactly. And the fact is, this can turn around on the other side as well. I wouldn't like to see it, and I'm rather hoping it will never happen. But the fact is, anybody in power can just subjectively decide, no, I don't want this person to have a gun because they said Trump was a decent president. That's it. Or, or the climate change denier should not have a gun, or something. Or, oh no, that person's carbon footprint is way too big. That's right. There's technology out there. That person's carbon footprint's way too big. I don't think they should have a gun. Heck, we'll stop their electric car from moving as well. But that's a different story for a different day.
Well, Chris, I think there needs to be a bifurcation of the system where the liberal left live by their rules and the rest of us don't. Because if they live by their rules, they will disarm themselves, let them be victimized, let them kind of go off on a dead end. What do you call? Who was the guy that did the theory of evolution? They can go off on an evolutionary dead end and just die out. So just saying.
Absolutely. That's what we might be doing as well. But that's another different story for a different day. I have two words for you there: Common Core. But again, that could be a whole other show. Yet I firmly believe, and if we want to go to emotionalism versus pragmatism when it comes to voting, I do believe the deliberate dumbing down of education does have something to do with it. And we're starting with Zinstery from the 70s and 80s on through invented spelling into Common Core of today. And this is what you create. But again, that we can discuss at a fully different program. However, we're approaching the end of the hour, so I do want to ask for final thoughts from both of you fine gentlemen. What do you see from the midterms outward? The final thought would consider this. There is a discussion as to who is going to control, who's going to be the next Speaker of the House. Could it be McCarthy or could it be somebody else? There is a rebellion. Now, I remember there was a little rebellion against Nancy Pelosi, but she knew how to squash people and destroy them. So that might be a different story when it comes to McCarthy. what are your gentlemen? What are your thoughts on whether McCarthy or someone else could be the next Speaker of the House?
No, McCarthy's going to win, and I think and Trump's already endorsed him too, so it's kind of like it's done. I just don't think the establishment's going to go, quietly into the dark, into the night. They just are not. And again, this is something I hope Trump recognizes. I think it was a mistake to embrace and endorse McCarthy. McCarthy does not stand for any policies the Trump administration really wanted to accomplish. The border was never accomplished. Fentanyl streaming across, issues relating to defense, issues relating to voting. These things were never codified in a way that I think would have been best. So I don't think that McCarthy is going to be anything more than what was going on before. Just saying.
Well, he did one very good move, McCarthy, which is that he defended Bobert and.
Fair enough. He did do that.
So that was a smart move. I don't think 10 years ago he would have done that. But right. At this point, he realizes, hey, they're relying on Ocasio-Cortez and the crazy lady in Minneapolis.
They were strangely quiet during that election season, gentlemen.
Right. Surprisingly quiet. That's right. But so I think, let's give him some credit. He's not that bad of a guy. The problem is, and this, again, I wrote this in my article in the American Spectator, and I go back to this. I don't think if you have a guy named McCarthy leaving your group, I don't think you can have aggressive hearings. You can't have the McCarthy hearings. It just plays right into the hand of everyone writing copy for the Democrats. They're clearly going to jump on it and make a campaign. Oh, here we go again, the McCarthy hearings. It's just an accident to birth that happens to be the guy's name. But I think you can either have McCarthy or you can have hearings. You can't have both.
We're going to be talking about all of these things as the days move forward. We also have a few very special programs coming. And yes, the much anticipated episode number 5 of Culture Wars, The Insurrection will be coming.
That's right. It's going to be great.
The year.
It's going to be great.
Yes,
just
absolutely.
It's going to be huge.
It's going to be bigly huge. I'll tell you that.
Bigly huge. That's
huge? Right. There we go. For Project Sentinel and the Herb London Center for Policy Research, follow us on both sites, londoncenter.org and projectsentinel.net. Subscribe to us on Patreon if you would like. If you enjoy us, patreon.com/thought2action. There are going to be a lot more things coming up in 2023. So keep an eye out for that. Once again, I'm Chris Cordani, your host. I want to thank you all for joining us. Stay informed and make your day a great one.